This is the story of the man who took on the mightiest oil empire of the day, using an audacious master plan, which was hatched in secrecy and rolled out on a huge scale. Then, having achieved its aim, he decided there were more important things in life. This is the story of Marcus Samuel, our man from Maidstone. Throughout history, the arrival of new technology has had the effect of rendering something else obsolete. A good example of this took place at the beginning of the 19th century. The Battle of Trafalgar was fought in the Age of Sail, when Britain was the world's greatest sea power. And yet, only 33 years later, the rotting ship of the line, Temeraire, was being towed away to be broken up at Rotherhithe as the age of steam dawned. As Britain's navy converted over to steam, a huge global network of coaling stations was created, and the coal mines in Wales and England flourished. But within just 50 years, another new technology, in the shape of oil, emerged, and this too was a game changer, as we will see. First, let's introduce the three main players in this story and find out what drove them. We have John D. Rockefeller, the most powerful and wealthiest oil baron the world has ever seen. He ran his huge Standard Oil empire from here, 26 Broadway, in New York. As a man, Rockefeller was motivated by power and money. Secondly, we have Winston Churchill, and his motive in our story was to preserve Britain's naval dominance. The navy was powered by plentiful coal, but Britain had no source of oil anywhere in its vast empire. Nevertheless, oil was a far more efficient fuel, so there was no choice. Coal had to go. The big problem Churchill was facing now was how to get hold of a secure supply of oil. And finally, we have the man from Maidstone, Marcus Samuel, not even an oil man, but the one who dared to play the mighty Rockefeller at his own game, and won. His motivation was different. It was patriotism. Samuel's father set up a small business in 1832 in East Smithfield, known then as Sailor Town, close by the Tower of London. He dealt in bric-a-brac and exotic novelties, which he bought from returning sailors. His speciality was seaside souvenirs, like this, made from seashells. As the business grew, he eventually employed 40 girls in his East End workshop. His two sons, Marcus and Sam, were educated in Brussels and Paris, and took over running the business in 1870. Over the years they built the company up and were trading in wool, cotton and tea imports, in banking and the export of heavy machinery. The name Samuel became a highly respected and dominant force in the Far East and Japan, where they built up a vast distribution network run by many well-trusted and influential business partners. In the Victorian era, light paraffin oil was sold in cans for lamplight. Heavy oil was at that time a waste product, but this was all about to change. John Rockefeller was born here in 1839. His father was a bigamist and a salesman who once boasted, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. It makes them sharp." Young Rockefeller had an aptitude for hard work, finance and ruthless deal-making. He founded Standard Oil in 1870, and within a few years had taken over, or taken out, his main 22 competitors by savage price cutting, after which he would raise prices back up again, with the competition either bust or swallowed up. But life was about to get tougher. Marcus Samuel's vision and courage was going to transform the oil industry. In 1891, the Rothschilds were financing oil exploration in Western Russia and were looking for a way to sell this oil to markets in the Far East, which were dominated by Standard Oil. The problem was that the only shipping route was around Cape Horn, which made the oil uncompetitive against Rockefeller, who had always undercut any competitor's prices. Of course, the Suez Canal had opened over 20 years earlier, but for safety reasons, no ships carrying oil were permitted to use this route. In their search for a solution, it was suggested, as a long shot, that the Rothschilds should approach Marcus Samuel, due to his deep knowledge and key contacts in all the Far East markets, despite him having no involvement in the oil business. It was now that the genius of Marcus Samuel revealed itself. He agreed a deal with the Rothschilds and decided to hit all Far Eastern markets in one sudden hammer blow, borrowing Rockefeller's own tactic of undercutting Standard Oil's market prices. But he first needed a way of getting the oil there cheaply, and this meant going through the Suez Canal, which would cut 4,000 miles off the shipping route. But first he had to show this could safely be done. In total secrecy, Samuel went out and commissioned a whole fleet of specially designed bulk tankers, which allowed Lloyd's of London to award them safety certification, and in turn allowed the British-controlled canal directors to agree that his ships could pass through Suez. But it didn't stop there. Rockefeller shipped his oil in thousands of tin cans, but Samuel's new ships carried cheaply in bulk, and after discharging their cargoes, the holds were cleaned out and used to ship goods back to Britain. Win-win. Rockefeller couldn't compete. Then the question arose, what to call Samuel's newfound oil business? He thought back to the family's business origins in Smithfield, and in 1897 came up with his entire fleet was named after different shell types, and Murex, the first to be launched, made her maiden voyage, carrying 3,500 tons of oil to Singapore. But a new problem emerged. After discharging the oil into storage tanks, Shell's customers had no containers to take their orders away in. Typically, Samuel reacted fast. He ordered complete tin can manufacturing plants, which were quickly shipped out to the Far East and reassembled over there. The next year he ordered 10 more tankers, all with Shell names such as Conch and Clam. But here's the point when Samuel's focus started to move away from Shell, towards what was to become a long and distinguished career, supporting civic and charitable causes. However, in 1891, a British warship, HMS Victorious, embarrassingly went aground off Egypt, and defied all attempts to refloat her. Without being asked, Samuel sent his tanker Pecton to help, and she was able to tow the stranded ship free. He received a knighthood from a grateful government for his act of patriotism. He began to look for a country estate suitable for his growing status in society, and in 1895 purchased the 500-acre Moat Park in Maidstone, where he laid out cricket and rugby pitches, complete with his own private pavilion. Then in 1902, having become a celebrated figure in the city, he was elected Lord Mayor of London. While this was happening, Shell was left more or less to run itself, and things began to go wrong. From the same cramped premises in Smithfield, a handful of clerks worked without any strategic direction, and it was once said that 9 months went by without a single visit from Samuel. Soon the company began to struggle financially, and in 1907 he lost full control, when he was forced to sell 60% of the business to a competitor, Royal Dutch. This was his new boss. But again, new technology intervened, and again British sea power was under threat. This time it was the arrival of faster oil-driven ships in the place of coal, which had the effect of making much of the navy obsolete. The rise of Germany, with its growing fleet, sharpened minds, and in 1912 Churchill set up a royal commission to advise on a strategy to secure oil for the navy. Samuel and Detterding were called in and asked what price Shell wanted for its oil, and what quantities they could guarantee. Fatefully, Samuel answered, in effect, that the price would be whatever it would fetch on the market. It got worse when he said he could supply 1 million tons a year, only to be contradicted by his boss, who said, "Make that 500,000. Any trust Churchill might have had in Shell was shaken, if not completely dispelled. The upshot was that the government helped secure its own supplies by purchasing the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which later became BP. Nevertheless, throughout World War I, Shell was the main supplier of TNT and sole supplier of aviation fuel to the forces. The company even agreed to destroy its oil fields in Romania, 17% of Shell's production at the time, to deny access to Germany, and followed this by handing over its tanker fleet to the British government. Samuel was created the first Baron Bearsted for his contribution to the war effort. In 1925, Samuel was elevated to Viscount Bearsted, continuing with his wife to support many charities, hospitals, museums, and adding to his growing art collection. When he died in 1927, his son Walter took over as chairman of Shell. Walter sold Moat Park to Maidstone Council in 1927 and moved to Upton House in Warwickshire, where he actively encouraged young artists by putting their work onto Shell advertisements. So was Churchill right not to trust Shell, despite Samuel's long-proven patriotism? For some people the answer might be Detterding's funeral in 1939, but his support for Nazism came much later. The truth is, the government was always uncomfortable with the company's foreign ownership. Marcus Samuel is remembered in this church window and in this portrait which hangs at the moat. He is buried in the Jewish cemetery at Willesden. In his will, Marcus Samuel's father asked one thing of his sons: keep the good name of Marcus Samuel from reproach. I think we can safely say that his final request was carried out to the letter.